Dear participants, our second session today is with a very senior professor in economics, Professor MP Bezbaruah sir. He is a professor in Department of Economics in Gauhati University. He is a very senior professor. He is member of many academic and administrative committees. He has been in hundreds of, if not hundreds, then dozens of at least interview committees in different universities across the country. He is a well-known name in the field of economics. He has authored more than 5 books. He has got published more than 60 research papers in very good journals listed in his Scopus and Web of Science and UGC Care. He has produced 30 PhD scholars and 7 MPhils, and he has completed 19 research projects funded by different agencies. So we are fortunate that he is here with us for a presentation today. Thank you, sir, for agreeing to our request for being here, and you always be there whenever we call you. So, sir is going to talk on evolution of macroeconomic theory. Sir, we have already shared his PPT with all the participants. So he may start his. Sir, now time is yours, sir. You may start.
Okay. Very good morning to Professor Singh and others who are organizing this course, and I'm thankful to the organizers for inviting me to this particular course. It's always a pleasure to talk to people of my profession. As has been announced, the topic is going to be evolution of macroeconomic theory. So it will be a slightly change of the flavor, because the earlier session, as I could overhear, was on the practical task of logistics and whatnot, and of course AI is everywhere these days. Now I'm taking you back to the world of theory, but then theories are not not unrelated to our lives. So and I have chosen to speak on macroeconomic theory because primarily because this is a mixed group comprising of economics, commerce, and business management people. So, but macroeconomics is concerned for everybody. Of course, it is a concern for the economists, but for commerce and business administration also, business environment often depends on what is going on in the macroeconomic situation. So, with this, consideration, actually, I thought of speaking on this particular subject. Now, give me a minute. I'll have to switch off the phone.
Sir, please adjust your camera. Your face is not visible. Only half of the face is coming.
Face is not visible.
Yeah. Only half of the face we can see, sir. Little down.
Actually, I cannot see.
That is fine, sir. That's better.
No?
Yes.
Okay. So let me go to the slides now.
Okay, sir.
And I think before that, let me put my phone on the Okay. Are the slides visible to everybody?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir. Make it in presentation mode, sir. Full screen.
Yes. Is this full screen now?
Yes, sir. Perfectly fine.
And everybody can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sir. All right. Let us then, all the niceties are over. Now let us come back to the situation. So in the first slide, I'm trying to, like in a restaurant you go, they give you the plates and the fork and knife. A few initial things I'm talking about. And I'm sure everybody knows about this, but then it's not a bad idea to remind you. First of all, macroeconomics is about what? It's about the entire economy. So here we are not talking about which industry is doing what, which individual is which individual is placed. You're talking about the economy as a whole, right? So what are the key concerns of macroeconomics? First one is the GDP. After all, GDP is the gross domestic product, is the total size of the economy. It's the total amount of grossly income generated for the whole economy. So what is the size of the economy? And what is the growth rate in it? More concerned we are with the growth rate. Is it picking up? Is it going down? As you must be seeing that there is a controversy between the Reserve Bank of India right now and the government of India, because the government economists are saying that growth rate of the last quarter is 5.2 or something, whereas the RBI maintains it will be 7 point something. Anyway, so growth rate is one of the concerns. Then inflation rate and unemployment. I think these are the four basic things. Then there can be other things also, but these four things are very, very, frequently discussed in macroeconomics. So I'll just like to clear out one more thing. We know inflation is a process of rising prices. At what inflation rate is the rate at which prices are rising. But I'd like to clarify one thing. How do you measure this price rise? What you do is that you compare the price index of the present week, all right, with the price index of not the previous week, but the corresponding week last year. Now, so this is how the inflation rate is measured. So it's an annual inflation rate, first of all. And secondly, why we are not comparing with the last weeks, rather we are comparing with the last year's corresponding week. It's because in prices there is usually a seasonality. All right, apart from the fact that over time prices tend to, as a whole, prices tend to rise, but there is a seasonality. Now, it's the time when the prices will gradually fall for some time. It has already started falling for some time. So from March onward, again, the prices will start rising. So to take care of this seasonality, when the inflation rate is measured, it is measured by increase in the price index, whichever price index you take, consumer price or wholesale price, okay, which corresponding increase in the price index correspond this current year, by how much the price index of the current week of this year is higher than the week of the price index of the corresponding week last year. So this is the second week of December. So if we have measured the current inflation rate, suppose it is 6%, that means that prices on the whole are 6% higher than this year 24 is 6% higher than the prices of the 23 second week of December. I hope it's clear enough. Now, other concept is unemployment. So I'm sure everybody knows, but I'm again not like to remind. The unemployment, who are the unemployed? Unemployed is a person in the working age group. So person has to be in the working age group. So if the old person is not working, we can't call the person unemployed. So working age group is usually 15 to 60 or something, some countries. So unemployed will be a person in the working age group who's looking for work, but is not able to find any work. So that person will be called unemployed. And what is the unemployment rate? This is important because unemployment rate keeps going up and down. In India, it's around now, say 7%. Now, what is the 7%? This is the percentage of unemployed in the total labor force. The slides I circulated, I called it workforce, but that's not correct. Labor force is workforce plus the unemployed. So percentage of unemployed, to the total workforce, that's called unemployment rate. So these are the basics. Any questions, if there is there, I can answer that, or we can move to the next slide. Now, how did actually macroeconomics, sort of came into being? See, if we look at the classical, neoclassical economics, classical, of course, are the times of Adam Smith, Ricardo, and all that. Then neoclassical, I mean, basically pre-Keynes neoclassical I'm talking about, Alfred Marshall, Pigot, and all that. So those economists, they had not, they had not treated the macroeconomic economy separately from the microeconomic situation. So their theory was basically micro-based, and they were great believers in the working of the market forces. So, for instance, how does the market system work? So, if any commodity is in shortage, for instance, all right, if a commodity is in shortage, people are not able to buy the commodity at the quantity they wanted to buy, its price will go up. Now, once the price goes up, some corrections take place. What correction takes place? So, if it becomes expensive, so some buyers will withdraw, from the market. They will stop. They'll postpone their buying. Whereas the sellers find higher prices more attractive, so they might bring out more supply to the market. So, therefore, if there's a shortage, some people are going to, because of rise of prices, some demand will be reduced, some supply will be increased, and the whole thing will get corrected. The reversing will happen if there's a abundance. Suppose there is a lot of goods in the market, they are not getting sold. Then in that case, the prices will start to fall. Once the price fall, people tend to buy more, but at the same time, the sellers would like to withdraw part of their stock, to be waiting for a better day and all that. So this is how market, according to the classical writers, actually corrects all the imbalances in between demands and supplies. And now, what has this got to do with macroeconomics? As I said, in macroeconomics, one of the biggest concerns is unemployment. All right. So unemployment means the workers not getting work, right? So according to them, the labor is a commodity like, it's just another commodity like what we call potatoes and tomatoes. All right. So if there's unemployment, for instance, what really happens? Suppose there is unemployment, it means that there is excess supply of workers, right? So there are more people seeking for job than jobs are available. Now they believe that this excess supply of workers is going to reduce the price of labor, that is the wage rates. So wage rates will get reduced, and as a result of which, actually, some of the workers who are offering the work, they will withdraw because they think that lower wages is not worth working. It's better to take leisure, stay at home. All right. And whereas because the wages have fallen now, some business people, some investors, some employers who thought the workers were too expensive now will find it attractive to employ more workers. So their demand for workers will increase, whereas supply of labor will fall. And like the price of tomatoes and tomatoes, changing, correct the imbalances in the market. Similarly, the labor market, the imbalances will be corrected, and there will be no unemployment. So unemployment actually is something which is they rule out by their theory. There are more intricacies I do not like to go into. All right. Now, this theory came under serious challenge in the time of Great Depression of 1930s. In 1929, there was this big fall in the US stock market. Following that, there was prolonged recession, which actually is called a Great Depression, because recession, when it becomes very severe, we call it depression. So there was fall in output, employment, there was fall in income, nothing was happening, and it was not getting corrected. As predicted by the classical writers, it should have been corrected by falling prices and all. But this was not happening. All right. So it lasted for several years, 33, 34, 3, 4, 5 years, I think it lasted. All right. So it was becoming very serious, and so people started doubting the what you call the efficacy of the classical neoclassical theory of the macroeconomic and the explanation of the macroeconomic, and in particular the unemployment situation. In such a situation, macroeconomics actually came out as a distinct branch of study due to the contributions of the great Lord John Maynard Keynes. Now, Keynes came up with an alternative perspective, which is quite radical at the time, So he actually came up with the idea that the macroeconomy actually doesn't necessarily work the way the classical writers thought it is going to work. Two things are important here. Now, if we look at the demand in the economy as a whole, so he now goes away from individual market of labor or tomatoes and potatoes. He says, let's look at the demand in the economy as a whole, which he calls the aggregate demand. That actually consists of mainly two parts. What are the parts? The first part is what we public, plan to spend on goods and services. This is called consumption demand. Okay, how households and individuals, plan to how much they plan to spend for, consumption. Okay, foods, vegetables, clothing, or even durables and all that. Okay, so what we are planning to purchase, that is part of the demand. And other part of demand is what the business people are planning to invest. So these are the two major components of aggregate demand in the economy. Of course, there are if we go to an open economy thing, then export demand can be another. So for the timing, we'll assume it is to be a closed economy. So consumption and investment. Of course, government will come in a little shortly. Keynes will bring in government very shortly. So what happens actually is the second component. The first component is not very complicated. If you have more income, we like to spend on more on consumption. So that is very much related to income and all. But the second component is a little dicey. What is the second component? How much the business houses would like to invest. Now, why is it complicated? Because this depends to a great extent on their perception. How the economic environment is it? What is the economic scenario? That perception of their actually, is very, very influential. All right. So sometimes what Keynes said is that sometimes, and this cannot be entirely forced, or this perception of the future, it has to have your hunch, your that the business people are driven by the animal spirit, the instinct. Animal spirit is basically the instinctive decision, and they also may suffer from what is known as the herd mentality. Herd mentality means, if you look at the ships, if one ship goes in one direction, others do follow. So that means if one fellow actually develops a pessimistic outlook about the economy, this becomes contagious. Other investors also start talking about that. Okay, so what happens actually is that if in the economy the investors develop a pessimistic sort of outlook of the future, they may hold back investment, they may not carry out investment. As a result of which, what happens? Our demand, which is consumption expenditure plan plus investment expenditure, which the firms are willing to take, that may fall short of our production. That is, goods and services which are being produced. So in such a situation, goods and services, a large part of goods and services will not remain, will remain actually unsold. It will add to the inventories of the it will add to the inventories, and this is the unplanned inventory. And every business houses have some inventory, but this will be unplanned inventory accumulation. And if you have unplanned inventory accumulation, obviously farms are going to be discouraged in carrying out further production. So they might actually cut down production. If they cut down production, what happens actually is that there will be layoff of people, so there will be unemployment. And Keynes says that the price cuts will not help here, because the root cause is basically the pessimism of the investors regarding the economy. So prices you may cut, but that's not going to help. So what he says is that the situation can be improved only by coming in of the government. This is a very important thing. I'll say radical. Why? Because earlier the economists thought that government has no role in the economy except that providing law and order and all those kind of stuff. So government should not be intervening in the economy. Laissez-faire they believed in. All right. Now Keynes says no. If the government doesn't come up to boost the budget, boost the demand in the economy is going to keep on having unemployment for a long time. It will go into depression, incomes will fall, welfare is going to be less. So basically he suggested is that if we have a situation like this, the recessionary, depressionary situation, government should come up with its own expenditure plans. Now if government comes out, spending in various kind of things, all right, and this will put money into the hands of the public, all right, because government will spend, so money will come to the public. The public will start spending their money for income, consumption and all that. Now, when there is consumption demand rising, government demands rising, this will actually reverse the pessimism of the business people regarding what you call the business environment. So they will feel now more optimistic. They will come and invest, and the economy will be back in the recovery course. Okay, output will start rising, income will start rising, there will be more employment, and so on and so forth. All right. So this is essentially the story of Keynesian economics. As very simply stated, I'm leaving out the complicated parts. So essentially, this is the story of Keynesian economics, and Keynesian economics became very, very popular, like particularly with the governments, because if you ask the government to spend more there, they really love to do it. But apart from that, also otherwise, also among economists, also it became very, very popular, and it actually ruled the Western capitalist world for about 40 years, right from 1930 to 1970. For 40 years, Keynesian economics was the mainstream economics at the time. So classical, neoclassical economics was reduced to microeconomics. So in macroeconomics, which has emerged as a new branch, Keynesianism was the basically ruling thread of theory. Now that good time, every good thing has to end at some point of time. So in 1970s, there was a new phenomena in the capitalist world, which has actually, brought challenge to the Keynesian theory. This is called stagflation. That means stagnation and inflation together. Now, inflation is a process of rising prices. So there, if you have inflation, that means demand must be growing. All right. So if demand is growing, supply should also be responding to it, and there should be growth. But what actually happened in that period in 1970s, there was an inflation going up, but at the same time, there was stagnation. The economies were not growing, they're stagnating. Employment was not growing. There are a lot of changes happened in 1970s. Oil prices increased and a lot of things happened. Later on, people built theories on this. So Keynesian economics could not explain this. According to Keynesian economics, when there is inflation, this means that this is a signal of growing demand. So if demand is growing, then economy should be responding with increased supply, higher output, higher production, higher growth, higher employment. But that was not happening. So there was a big challenge to Keynesian economics. All right. Okay. And we find that in that period, in response to this stagflation situation, the neoclassical economics made a serious comeback. There were at least three strands of economic theory which actually tried to reinforce the neoclassical, point of view that actually leave things to the market forces. They are going to take everything. They'll correct everything. All right, government should take their hands off from economy. Now, these three strands of what you call the economic theory are monetarianism, neoclassical economics, and real business cycle theory. Friends, are you with me so far? I think this is only the basic background. Can I hear a voice there? Or has everybody gone to sleep or lunch?
Sir, our participants are not having access to audio, so they may not speak, but they will write their message in chat box.
Okay. I hope it's going okay, or am I going very fast or something?
No, it's fine, sir. Yeah. Some messages are there. Your voice is clear. Yes, we are listening. Priyanta Ghosh, Amit
Okay,
Kumar.
wonderful. Thank you very much. So let me carry on. So this is, I think, so far everybody knows this. So now the story, I believe, again. So let's start with monetarianism. So monetarianism is not a new thing, actually. Milton Friedman, his name is associated with this. Friedman actually started writing about these things, criticizing Keynesianism and all that in 1960s itself, late 50s and 60s. But then he was seriously read only in the 1970s when the economy is actually had the problem of stagflation. Now, Friedman also came up with very interesting ideas. He said that in every economy, some amount of unemployment is unavoidable. All right. So he calls this rate of unemployment, he calls it the natural rate of unemployment. It may be 4%, 3%, or 5%, depending on the economy. this can arise because, one industry may be dying, another may be coming up. So as people move from one industry to the other, all right, so some people will remain unemployed for some times. People may be leaving their job in one office, then they may be joining in the next 15 days or something. So there will be temporary unemployment for various reasons. Every economy will not have, no economy is going to have zero unemployment at any point of time. You are going to have at the natural rate of unemployment. He says this is something equivalent to full employment only. All right. So natural rate of unemployment, suppose 4%, 5%, etc. Is there. All right. It is bound to be there. You can reduce it in the long run by doing some other kind of reforms. Okay. So for instance, how quickly people can find jobs. If we can do that, if you can do reforms, then you can reduce the natural rate of unemployment, but that's like long time. In the short term, it is going to be there, so you have to live with this. Now, suppose the government takes up expenditures, takes up inflationary policies to reduce unemployment. What will happen, in fact, is that Friedman says that it may work for a short period of time. For a year or two, it might work. Government is spending more, and this is fooling the people in believing that demand is rising. So therefore, the businessman may expand, and there can be more, what we call, more sort of employment output, etc. However, if it is persistent, if this inflationary policy is persistent, people will start expecting that amount of inflation. Now, what happens if that happens? Say, for instance, business people will know that there will be inflation, so there are raw materials and workers are going to cost more, so they will save some money for future higher expenditure. Similarly, households are also going to do the same thing because rice and dal are going to be more expensive, next month. So we'll have to keep something so that we can buy more. So what will happen actually is that once people start expecting the inflation, they may actually adjust their behavior to the expected inflation. As a result of which, the current policy of, putting more money in the hands of people is not going to help. This will not help because people will have to save for future inflation, and as a result of which, ultimately, there will be no reduction from the natural rate of unemployment. Only inflation will keep going higher and higher. So that is why it is said technically that in the short run, the Philip curve, it's called a Philip curve, it may be negatively sloped, but in the long run, it will be a vertical straight line showing that same unemployment rate with higher and higher, what we call inflation rate. So this is something which Friedman, these are the elements of Friedman's theory. Now, the next important thing is that Friedman, why is he called monetarist? Because he actually believed that if you increase money supply, by the way, I'd like to go back to one thing that Keynes, when he said that there should be increase in government expenditure, he's talked about government budgets mostly, fiscal expenditure, but his followers say no, monetary policy, monetary expansion and fiscal expansion, both should be adopted. Now, Friedman comes to the issue whether monetary expansion is going to expand the economy. He admits that, yes, if there is an increased supply of money in the economy, what will happen actually is that this will increase the nominal national income. Nominally, money-wise, the money in national income is going to go up, GDP is going to increase. So there may be partly real income increase, partly inflation. So something is going to happen. However, he does not recommend that you should increase money supply when there is recession or decrease money supply when there is inflation. Now, if you believe that money supply increase and decrease can reduce GDP, increase and reduce GDP, why are you now saying that you should not adjust money supply to, recession, adjust, to fight recessions or fight inflation? Now, his argument is that, based on his own research, he says that, yes, broadly, money supply increase is going to increase nominal income, but it will not work instantaneously. It works with lags. And the lags are how are these lags? These lags are long and variable. It may not work immediately, it will take some time. And sometimes it may take in a relatively shorter period, sometimes it may take a longer period. So there's no predictability about the lags, he says. So therefore, actually, this will be dangerous to adjust your money supply to recessions and inflation. Because by the time, suppose there is a recessionary situation and you want to expand money supply. So what will happen, in fact, is that he says that apparently theoretically it's good, but as you expand the money supply, it will work after some time when the recession may be over. All right. And in that case, actually, as the effect of money supply start working, then actually we are going to have a very accelerated inflation. Similar will be the case if you are trying to curb inflation by curbing money supply. All right. So you are trying to curb money supply to curb inflation, but then by the time the curb becomes effective, inflation itself was probably coming down. So therefore, it will aggravate a recession. So what he says is that if we try to adjust money supply contra-cyclically, this might actually we might end up destabilizing the economy. That means we are going to accentuate inflation and recession. So instead of doing that, what he suggested is that let money supply increase at a steady rate. In the long term, in the economy, the demand for money increases. Demand for money means the money you require for, sort of keep the economy, oiled and all that. The demand for money increases. Suppose it increases at a rate of 5%, 2% maybe, So maybe you may have a rule for expansion of money supply by 7% or 5% or whatever. All right. So let money supply steadily keep on increasing, irrespective of whether there is inflation or recession. So that's where the monetarism name came. So instead of using a contra-cyclical monetary policy, use a steady increase in money supply so that your growth is not hampered, the long-term growth is not hampered. All right, so economy keeps on rising. So this is in essence was Keynes's, the Friedman's basically theory. And there's one more component. Actually, he says that in his view, the private economy actually is very, very stable. It's not unstable. Private economy is quite stable. All right. Actually, it is the government interventions, which can destabilize the economy. Like the earlier illustration I just gave, that's his illustration. If the governments try to intervene it may not have the good information, so it may actually end up destabilizing the economy. So government should keep his hands away from the economy, except that, steadily increasing the money supply. In fact, he has collected a lot of evidence to show that the Great Depression of 1930s was not so much because of demand deficiency, as Keynes has said. He says that it was because of undue, unwarranted contraction of money supply just before the Great Depression that has led to this particular depression. So according to him, so I think Friedman's work is quite interesting. And if you have any questions, I'm unable to see actually box here. So let me finish the presentation, then I'd like to address all the issues. I'll leave you at least half an hour for discussion. Okay. Then there are some extremists. Everywhere there is an extremist. We have militants and extremists. So if you call Milton Friedman was a militant, then there was an extremist called, the people like Sargent and Lucas and all. They actually they came up with more strongly classical view. They say that when people form their expectations, they take into account all information. All right. And they form their expectations rationally. In the Friedman situation, what happens? People learn from their experience that inflation is going to be there. Inflationary policies are government are following. 1 or 2 years it will go. After that, they will learn the inflationary process. So their expectation formation was adaptive expectation process. Whereas this new classical say that the expectation formulation is rational. They will not wait for 2 years to learn from experience. Basically, they will see that government policy, they are increasing, deficits, so inflation is going to be there. So they will take into account they will adjust immediately, take into account all information and adjust their behavior immediately. So they say that therefore the policy will be completely ineffective. So it's known as policy ineffectiveness hypothesis. unless the policy come as a shock when people didn't expect it at all. All right. So, like we remember shocks, the demonetization was a shock, or similarly, when you had the lockdowns for the COVID period, those were shocks. I'm not criticizing those shocks, but he says that if it comes as a shock, it may work. But if it comes as a well discussed or well known policy initiative, it might not work. So basically, this school enforces what Milton Friedman has said and try to enforce it even more strongly. That's it. I'll come to this theory. Let me take a sip of water first. Next comes the third of these three theoretical formulation, which actually tries to reinstate classical neoclassical views. And this one is known as the real business cycle theory. This is the theory is slightly, it's very elegant, very detailed and all that. And if I had to do it, I require not one actually, I require 2 sessions for that. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to discuss the gist of this theory. I think those of you who are not in hardcore economics, I think the gist itself will be enough for you. So this was founded by, again, 2 Nobel laureates, Kydland and Prescott. And there are other workers, of course, but the RBC theory is based on the classical assumption of price flexibility. See, we'll come to this point again also. Remember when I talked about the classical, neoclassical model, they believed in the price flexibility, that is, prices fall and prices rise quickly depending on whether there is excess supply, excess demand, all right, and they do the adjustment. So this theory also believes, whereas Keynes says that prices actually don't change that frequently. I will come to that point again. So price, actually market cannot correct the unemployment situation. So government is required to come in. Whereas these people, real business cycle theory, they believe that prices actually are very, very flexible. The market quickly responds to excess demand, excess supply. Prices change and corrections are done. So this is the cornerstone of their theory. So model, as I said, is very detailed and elegant. So founded on optimization of individual agents. You don't have to really put too much of mind into it. Now, just let me tell you, if you are an agent, we have to do two things. Like as we are, so imagine yourself as a consuming household. We have to take 2 decisions. One is that how much you have to keep for future and how much you have to use the current period. And secondly, how much of your resources you should use for production and how much you should save. So particularly labor, how much you should work and how much leisure you should take. So all these are optimization problems. So they actually come up with the idea that if wages are not very high, people prefer leisure than working. Anyway, I'll come back to that. And then from the individual, he built up the model. Okay, they build up the model and they then have their various markets, which actually leads to a general equilibrium framework. And this is a dynamic, stochastic general equilibrium. Dynamic means the current choices are linked to the future. As I said, household not only choose what to use today, but how much to save for tomorrow's, consumption. So that is the dynamic part. And all markets are taken together, so general equilibrium, and stochastic because there is uncertainties. So you don't have to really wreck your head about that, but basically it's a very, very elegant model. From this elegant model, what they come to say is that it is, so they counter Keynesian ideas. Keynes said that it is a problem with the demand, right? Remember, I just said half an hour back that it is basically the problem starts with the investors not having a good perception of the economy and therefore holding back their investment. So there's a demand deficiency. According to this, demand side is not the major problem. Okay, their major problem is that supply side shocks. If you have shocks in the supply side, then you are going to have ups and downs in the economy. So there are a number of examples I have given from them only. So unfavorable development in the physical environment, like floods, earthquake, and all those kind of things. If in the physical environment get disrupted, we may have a, negative what you call negative supply side shock. And let me come to the last one, because you have just heard about the artificial intelligence and all that. The disruptive technological advancement. Disruptive, earlier we used to be calling it in a negative term, disruptive, but now disruptive can be positive also. Disruptive technological change means when you have a technological breakthrough which throws away the old technology, brings a new, highly efficient technology. So that can actually be a positive, technological shock. So there are many examples given. I'm talking about two. One is, the negative example is, unfavorable development of the physical environment, and positive example is disruptive technological advancement. Okay. So positive shock is going to take the economy forward, 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 up and up and up, whereas negative one is going to take the economy down, down and down. So it will be generated in the supply side. A positive shock shifts the production function upward. Now, how does it work? Let me tell you this. I mean, this is like a story. Actually, if there's a positive technological shock, what happens actually is that, with the same resources, we are able to produce more. So, since we are able to produce more, labor productivity is higher. So, labor can actually be rewarded higher. So, they'll be getting more rewards. So, in such situation, staying put at home is very, very costly. Leisure is very, very costly. So people come out to work. All right. Once they work, work, not only they come out to work, they want to work more. Earlier, suppose they were working 6 hours, they will be now prepared to work for 10 hours and so on and so forth. So you get paid in the higher wages. So your income actually expands. So when your income expands, see, if your income is not expanding, if you are saving more, you are consuming less. But when your income is expanding, you can both consume more as well as save more. So saving is increased, consumption is increasing, capital is formed, therefore, at the same time, demand is also high. So everything will take the economy up and up and up. So productivity rise, it's something like this. The train is like this. Positive technological shock raises the productivity in the economy. It is almost come like an exogenous thing. Then what happens? People, because there's opportunity, people come out and work harder. They earn more, they save more, they consume more. All right, demand is high, save more, so investment will be higher. The capital formation will be higher. So the economy goes up and up and up. All right. Till, of course, people become saturated, dissatisfied. Okay, this is something where we need to stop. Now, negative supply shock will work exactly in the opposite. So suppose there is a negative technological shock, productivity will fall. All right. So opportunities for earning income will go away. Higher profit, higher wages will go away. So a lot of people who otherwise would work will actually withdraw from work. So they'll apparently be work without work. And so they say that what they say is that to remain out of work is a voluntary decision. It's not something which is imposed on any people. People are actually, they opt out to work. So therefore, they say that there's no such thing as involuntary unemployment. Okay? Voluntary unemployment is a voluntary choice between work and leisure, not to work. All right? So, according to, they are very, very radical. According to them, there is no such thing as unemployment. If you find people not working, going around, loitering around the street and all that, it's because they choose not to work. So it's quite, in a way, right wing or radical. Now, can policymakers do anything? Like Keynes says, government should come up with policy. They say no, policymakers cannot do anything about it. If people are not willing to work, how can government force them to work? So it will not work. So the best thing the government can do is that they should stay away from the business. So let the economy wait for the next positive technological shock, positive supply side shock. All right, so that the economy can be taken forward. This is roughly what is called the real business cycle theory. There are contention, it's not entirely the theory. Theory is much more elegant. Now, the followers of Keynes, of course, they were not, sitting idle. They have been criticized, okay, and they were trying to rebuild on the basis of this criticism. I probably mentioned already that the fundamental difference between the classical school and the Keynesian, classical, new classical, I include in the classical school not just the school of Adam Smith and Ricardo, but also this, what you call, these three schools, monetarism, new classical economics, and real business cycle theory. So all those schools on one side and the Keynesians on the other side, if you look at their main quarrel, their main contention is on the speed at which prices change and to restore imbalances in the market. Okay. Do prices actually change quickly in response to excess demand and excess supply and correct the markets? Or they don't change very quickly? Now, the Keynesians maintain that wages and prices don't change very quickly, they are sticky. All right, so therefore, we can't rely on the market to correct imbalances, unemployment, and other things. So we need to have government to intervene in the working of the economy. Whereas the classical, neoclassical schools, including those three, they say that actually prices are flexible. All right, they can actually do the job. Market can do the job. So leave everything to the market. Let the state government, the government, state or the government, basically, let the government remain out of the economic affairs. So this is essentially the two, you can say, points of view. Now, Keynes and his followers were initially criticized that you are saying that prices are sticky, prices don't change quickly, or wages don't change quickly. But how do you say it? You don't have any microeconomic theory to back up your, back up your contention that prices are sticky. So this was brought by Lucas, and it's known as Lucas critique. So the new Keynesians, they try to come up with, theories, micro foundation based theories to explain why prices are sticky. So we'll actually now spend some time discussing why prices are sticky. So I have changed the slide a little from the one which has been distributed. So first thing is that why are the prices sticky? Let us talk about this. Why are the prices sticky? I should have put a question mark there. I forgot to do it. Now, you see, most of the classical models are based on perfect competition, and you are all told that perfect competition is not very realistic situation. Although in approximation, this model may work well, but then real life, we have rather imperfect competition than perfect competition. But increasingly, now we are having a more and more imperfect competition. Now, what happens in an imperfect competition? All the firms have some control over their prices, right? I'm sure you have all read about this, monopolistic competition and other kind of oligopoly. So firms make their prices. In perfect competition, everybody is a price taker. They don't make the price. What market dictates the price and everybody takes it. Everybody follows it. Whereas in an imperfect competition, the firms have a control over their price. All right. Now, the firms actually are very hesitant to cut prices. See, if you have an unemployment, recession, goods are not being sold, you should start cutting prices. The firms are generally hesitant to cut prices. They would not like to be the first to cut prices because they might, or particularly raise prices. Cut prices. Of course, also they may be hesitant because they might, lose a lot of revenue if particular demand is inelastic. But on the other hand, they are more hesitant to raise prices because if you raise prices, you might lose the customers. So this is one thing. All right, and so inflationary situation, you should be raising. That's one thing. But the more important thing and more celebrated thing is the menu cost. I'd like to put a question to my participants. Of course, we are not in a interactive mode as of now. Suppose we all have samosas or masala dosas, if you like, all right? Okay, and one of the very important ingredient there is the potato. Now in the market, potato prices go up and down every day. But then in the restaurant, the samosa price cannot be rising every day or falling every day or something. Rising and falling every day. This is more or less constant for a period of time. Why is it so? See, whenever you try to raise the price of any commodity, there is a cost. It is called a menu cost because if you think of a restaurant, the menu has to be printed again. So that will be costly. So if you every time the chicken price goes up, if the chicken roll has to be price has to be adjusted to that cost, menu has to be printed every night. So that'll be difficult. That'll be costly also. So this menu cost actually prevents people from raising or lowering price, very in a short run. They will not like to raise or lower price because if they do it, there's a menu cost. Menu cost is not just a cost of printing a new menu. Actually, it's a figurative word. All right, it's basically means that if you change price, implementing the price change has lot of consequences. There are expenses. See, the farms these days are not small farms. There are small farms also, but basically you have the large big farms and all that. Even the small farms have problem because people will come, suppose in a momo shop. All right, people come there, I'll get a momo at 20 rupees a plate. So they will come with 20 rupees. Now suddenly you say, no, it's 25. Okay, they may not be able to buy momo. So there will be inconvenience for many things. So there's a cost of what I'm trying to say here is that implementing a price change, which is not a part of cost of production. So this is called menu cost. So if the menu cost is, so if your cost of production because of rise of inputs and all that, price of inputs and all that is not very large, okay, compared to the menu cost that we will have to incur for changing the price, people are not going to change the price. Okay, menu cost, if it is large, of course, it will absorb a lot of other costs. So because of menu cost, people are the farms are reluctant to change prices very, very frequently. In the long run, of course, they will have to, because if potato prices double, obviously samosa price will have to go up or masala dosa price will have to go up. But then till that time, they will not be able to increase. So these are basically not just said out of their mind. These are tested in real life empirical data. So this I found this quite interesting. I hope you do also. Now, why should the wages be sticky? There are two explanations. One is a nominal wage. Nominal wage means the money wage in terms of rupees or dollars, whatever you get. Okay. Now they say that in most of the industries, what happens? The workers' union and the management they negotiate that the wage is going to be this much, and it will remain there for 3-4 years or something like that. For a particular period of time, you negotiate the wages. So wages also cannot go up and down every day. That's one thing. The other one is more interesting. This is actually a little more deeper, and I found it quite interesting in Indian context also. What happens actually is that you see the classical theory believes that labor is like, as I said, potato or tomato. So if there is unemployment, excess demand for labor, so excess supply of labor, prices are going to fall and all that. So basically, demand supply determine the price of workers. Now, Keynesians have come up with the idea is that actually workers' prices are not demand determined. Workers' salaries and wages are not determined like that. They are paid, most farms actually pay workers, not the bare minimum, at which the workers will be available for work. So they would like to get more commitment from the workers, more effort from the workers. So they pay what is known as the efficiency wage. Suppose workers are available at a street corner at 400 rupees a day, all right, but the farm will not hire workers at 400 rupees, but they may offer 600 rupees per day because if I am offering more than what is there in the market, what happens actually is that I may get more loyal workers. Workers will put more efficient, more effort and all that. Okay, they will not leave me tomorrow and join someone else. I can train them up and all that. Okay, so a lot of reasons for why you should offer workers not the minimum wage that at which the workers will be available, but then what is known as the efficiency wage. Now, if wages are already at the efficiency level, all right, so these are not determined the way the classical writers thought. So this is an explanation given for what you call the wage rigidity in the market. So this is how the new classical economics, the new Keynesian economics, try to say why prices and wages are going to be sticky. So they have come with a rebuttal. There is more to it, but I'd not like to go into it. Why recession, how recession occurs, how it can be prevented, why the government interventions are needed. So all these things I'll not like to go on and on. All right. So I'll just like to sum up these two theories now, the classical side and the Keynesian side. As I said, the classical side, particularly the real business cycle theory, it has a very elaborate theory, very elegant kind of a theory. It may not be entirely realistic, but it's a very elegant kind of theory, well knit, various components, and it comes to the conclusion that prices, it is based on the idea that prices sort of are very, very flexible, and the supply side actually generates the shocks or fluctuations in the economy, ups and downs in the economy. So government has no role basically because these are exogenous shocks. On the other hand, the Keynesians maintain that it is actually the demand side. What are the demand components? Consumption demand, that is how much we want to spend for consumption, how much the farms want to invest, and what is the net export and import. So all these things actually has a role also, very important role. So they have said that prices are not going to be, you cannot rely on market and the prices because they are not very flexible, they don't work that effectively. So government need to come in and actually do the intervention. So these are roughly the two opposing kind of schools in macroeconomics. Now, of late, till last 20 years or so, we find a lot of changes. So there is an attempt to sort of synthesize the two opposing kind of schools into one consensus macroeconomics. I briefly, in this context, I'd like to actually mention one very important book, participants. It's not in the slide. So have you heard about Professor Dilip Nachne? You can write down the name. Dilip Nachne has a very interesting book. At least you can have it in your library. It is brought out by Springer, I think about 4 or 5 years back. I think it's the best comprehensive textbook on macroeconomics. Take writers in various or ways. Dilip Nachne book brought by Springer. Springer. It's on new consensus macroeconomics only, but it covers right from classical to Keynes to ISLM and all those, growth theory and everything. It's very comprehensive textbook. So this is a book you can have for your library, and if you like it personally, you can have it for your, particularly if you're teaching macroeconomics. I think this is a must. So what happens? Let us come to this slide. In the short run, Keynesian assumptions look more plausible, right? In the short run, like the example I gave of samosa and masala dosa and the chicken roll, the prices don't change every day. In the short run, prices are not going to rise or down, fall quickly. But then if you take a long period of time, prices actually become more flexible. Has to change, right? If potato prices keep on rising all the time, so at certain point of time, samosa prices will have to be raised. So in the longer run, we can take the price flexibility. So longer period you consider, real business cycle theory becomes more, more sort of, it has a bigger play. But in the short run, I think the Keynesian thing is more important. So there has been now attempt to build a new consensus incorporating elements of new Keynesian economics and real business cycle theory. The synthesis combines interpersonal optimization. I remember I talked about the optimization. The individual households have to choose how much to work, how much to choose leisure, how much to use for current consumption, how much to use for future savings and all that. So all these elements you take from the real business cycle theory, combine this with the imperfect competition and costly price adjustment in the short run of new Keynesian economics. So economists have tried to combine this. You keep the best of both the models. All right. The optimization part, the theoretical elegance of the real business cycle theory, you combine this with the assumption that markets are not perfectly competitive, they're imperfectly competitive, and price adjustment in the short run is not easy. It's costly. So using this, they have tried to sort of build up a new consensus macroeconomics. So in the new consensus macroeconomics, they admit that all kinds of fluctuations can actually, all kinds of what you call shocks can actually cause economic fluctuation. Not only the supply side shock, like the real business cycle theory says, or the demand side shock, like the Keynesian says. Both supply side shocks and demand side shocks can actually cause economic fluctuations. All right. So therefore, the moment you say that demand side has a shock so they actually admit that there is a role for government policy. The government has a role to intervene in the economy, to correct the economy. And they emphasize more on but monetary policy. And you would remember that last 10, 15 years, the central banks are now trying to follow what is known as the inflation target. So it is said that inflation targeting is keeping inflation under control is the main goal of monetary policy, which the central banks all over the world should follow. Now, why inflation management is important? It's because inflation, if it is high, it is very destabilizing. It can lead to speculation. It can lead to greater inequality. So this disrupts the society. At the same time, some inflations are necessary. The moment you accept that price cuts are not common, prices are rigid, but some prices in relative to other prices should actually be lower. So for that inflation, I am not sure I'm able to explain this point. See, what I'm trying to say here is that suppose prices generally do not fall, but we know that prices of talk time should be higher than probably should be rising faster than probably prices of clothes. All right. Then actually you can allow talk time prices to go by 10%, whereas the cloth prices remain unchanged. So relative price will change. Anyway, I mean, it's not something you really need to think too much about it. But so inflation targeting has become the thing, the in thing for monetary policy. Reserve Bank of India, for instance, its inflation target is 4%, but it has a tolerance band of 2% plus minus. So that means if inflation can fall up to 2%, RBI may not do anything. Inflation tries to shoot up above 6%, it will control the inflation, try to control the inflation. So basically, RBI's target is 4% with plus minus 2% as a tolerance limit. So each central bank has similar kind of limits. So I'm coming to not exactly concluding slide, but anyway, probably I'll stop at this point after this. So what happens actually, we have seen the entire evolution of macroeconomic theory. But when crisis comes, theory is set aside. So when we had this global financial crisis, many of you may not remember this if you're not old enough. There was a crisis in 2007 and 2008, the recession started. There was a lot of disruption of the world economy after this. And when this recession arrived, people forgot about, classical, neoclassical view. Basically, everybody became Keynesian. The similar disruption again, was there, the COVID time. So you cannot be waiting for the market to correct the whole thing. The supply side shock after all. But then, Jaan hai to jahan hai. There was, remember, Prime Minister Modi is saying. So basically, to save people's lives and livelihood, to save lives, you bring in the vaccines. Save livelihood, you spend money, put money in the hands of the people. So basically, that was not only done in India but other countries also. So people became in such crisis situation, they actually became Keynesians. So inflation targeting, which I was mentioning, in the good days they were talking about inflation targeting. Now they say that okay, 4% is fine, but that need to be maintained over a period of time. Not every year it may be 4%. It may sometimes be somewhat more, sometimes be somewhat less. Okay. So basically, over a period of time, you may allow it to go beyond 6% also, but over a period of time, it has to come back. Now, another interesting thing is that this classical neoclassical theory is based on the assumption of rational behavior. What is rational behavior? There it is assumed that everybody thinks about one's own gains. All right, everybody is very, very selfish. Now, there's a rise of behavioral economics. It has experimented with the idea whether people are actually do behave very rationally, very selfishly, and all that. What they have come out is that people may behave individually, but not all the time. Okay, they may be self-centered, they may be self-interest motivated, but not all the time, not all the dealings and all that. So from there arose the idea called bounded rationality. So you may be rational, but you may not be rational to the point of pursuing your own goal, harming others and all that. So once this question was raised about rationality, so a lot of foundation of economics is now shaken. So now there's a lot of work going on regarding accommodating in economic theory that imperfect rationality, not perfect. Human beings are no longer considered to be perfectly rational. With imperfect rationality, how to sort of maintain the economic theory. That is what is a new challenge for macroeconomic theory. So Nachner's book will take you up to new consensus macroeconomics, but to look at the new challenges coming mainly from behavioral and experimental economics, all right, you have to wait for some time, or maybe you can build your own theory there. You can contribute to the theory formation. So I have more or less finished my presentation. I had a couple of slides on the open economy because so far what we are discussing, we are taking the economy to be a closed one. But if we have an open economy, you have new challenges. So maybe I'll give you a chance to, make your, what do you call, questions and comments and so on and so forth. And if necessary, then I can come back to this particular 2 slides. Is that all right? Whoever is in charge?
Sir, so far I'm unable to see any question in the chat box.
Okay. Do you want me to discuss the open economy thing?
Yeah, one question came now, sir, from Ms.
Okay.
Kuheli Mukhopadhyay. She's
Okay.
asking, sir, does complexity economics leads to an altogether different policy proposition than the ones the neoclassical economics endorsed? What is your view on this, sir?
Yes, this is an interesting question, but she takes me to a different field. See, the neoclassical economics, as I said, very elegant theory they have come up with. Basically, Walrasian in nature. I'm sure she knows about it. So Walrasian beautifully, sort of models and all that. Now, there is an alternative school of economics which has emerged again, I think, in the last 20 years. This is not necessarily macro, it's more actually is a microeconomic thing. It says that, you see, if you look at the neoclassical economics, there is always there is always an underlying, I think it's okay, no? Underlying equilibrium. Okay, and economy continuously actually moves towards this equilibrium. Now, the evolutionary economics, and after that, what was the term she was using? Yeah. What was the word she was using? I forgot. I am becoming old now. So these two schools have come. They said that economy keeps on, complexity economics. So economic structures over time become more and more and more complex without sort of going towards equilibrium. So there is no settled equilibrium. You continuously evolve and actually become more and more complex kind of a situation. So under such a situation, you cannot easily theoretically predict what policies should be there. All right, so policy making will be even more challenging. And I don't think policy making will be completely unnecessary. So, for instance, AI now has a disruptive kind of a thing. As a result of post AI, the economic structures are going to be much more complicated. Already, computers have made everything so different. For instance, marketing has become so different, right? Gig economies have started. The AI is going to bring in more changes and so on. But then, policy will be required of different kind. For instance, the discussion that was going on in the previous session, so AI comes in, increases efficiency, increases more production, more output, more services. But at the same time, what happens actually? Who's going to buy this? How people are going to have income? So the policy will be necessary to distribute the gains from this fourth industrial revolution. So policy requirement will be there, but then policy has to be also as innovative as the complexity economic. As the complexity of the economic structures increase, the policy formulation, I'm not saying it has to be more complex, but it has to address the new challenges that it will throw up. But the fundamental thing is that policies are to be made for what? For sustaining and enhancing human welfare. So this should be the basic criteria. But if there is disruptive changes of any particular what you call development, complex because of the economy becoming structure becoming more and more complex, so one has to think about it in a creative kind of a manner. I don't know how far I have been able to satisfy this young lady. I presume she's young.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she will not be hearing about complexity economics.
So no more question. You may continue, sir.
Okay. Or can I break early? Because,
Yes, sir.
I've become a little old.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My voice is also beginning to fail a little.
Yeah, it's okay, sir. Okay, no problem.
Because those two slides are there. Okay, for 5 minutes, let me talk about those two things.
Okay, sir. Sure,
Then
sir.
I'll wind up.
Yeah.
Yeah. For 5 minutes, let me talk about those few things. See, what happens in an open economy? So far, we have been talking about the closed economy. Open economy, you'll have two very important things. One is that you're going to have international trades. Goods and services will be from foreign countries will be bought and our domestic goods and services will be sold. The other one is that capital flow. Capital will come in, capital will go out. Now, the first part, how much we export, how much we import, this depends on three things. First is the exchange rate. Why exchange rate? Exchange rate is what, by the way, is the price of foreign currency in terms of domestic currency. All right. So, for instance, now the US dollar is 84 rupees or something. So, if the exchange rate goes up, what happens? How are export import affected? Because our goods are going to become cheaper for the foreigners. All right. So, there will be more exports. Foreign goods will become more expensive for us. So, there will be fall of imports. So, this is one thing. Now, our own GDP, domestic GDP will also influence export and import. Because if we have higher GDP, we have higher income, so we want to buy more and consume more goods and services, which will be domestically produced goods as well as foreign goods. So we'll have less exportable surplus and we'll have more imports. So net exports are going to be adversely affected. Now the reverse thing will happen if global GDP increases compared to. So if global GDP increases, people are going to demand more goods and services, including what is produced in our own country. So exports will be encouraged. But these days, more important is the capital flow. All right. Now, the capital flows are actually after the IT revolution, after the uh, what you call, yes, capital flows have been liberated. Now, the capital can fly from New York to, Bombay to Hong Kong, at a click of a button in a minute. So, capital flows have become extremely important. Now, what depends on capital flows? We often hear FII have, you know, there's outflow of FIIs and all that. Now, this actually depends on the relative, returns on assets, financial assets particularly. So, if the assets in New York are giving more yield than assets in India, so a lot of people will actually take out their investment from India to New York Stock Exchange. Reverse will be the case if assets in India are giving higher returns, so people may bring in more capital. So, and interest rate therefore plays a very important role. So, if US is going to raise interest rate, we can expect, a lot of capital outflow from our country. So, there are two very important models for dealing with the open economy. One is the ISLM BP model. It explains how the open economy works, and there is another model called uh, the Fleming-Mandel model. And the importance of the Fleming-Mandel model has arisen because post-globalization, capital flows have become much more important than the trade flows. So if you look at India's balance of payment, trade flows probably will comprise only, the trade and related flows will comprise, the current account as we call it, will comprise only of 1/3 of the balance of payment. 2/3 is basically the capital flows. So Fleming-Mandel model says that, they analyze whether the policies, to what extent the economic policies will be effective, under perfect capital mobility. So they take an extreme example of perfect capital mobility. Under that, how policies are going to be effective or ineffective. Now, what they have shown is that something different from what Keynes thought, not the Keynesians. They show that if you have perfect capital mobility and if you have a flexible exchange rate, which we have now, all right, fiscal policy may not work. Actually, the monetary policy will work better. All right. On the other hand, if you have a fixed exchange rate system, which we had earlier, some countries still have, fiscal policy will be more effective, monetary policy will not be very, very effective. But generally, we live in a world of imperfect capital mobility. So a combination of fiscal and monetary policy should work. There's a thing called, impossible trinity. I may not discuss this. Thank you, I have said, but I'd like to point out what are the limitations of this presentation, what are the things we have left out. One very important branch of macroeconomics is the growth theory. You see, if you look at the economy dynamically over time, how it proceeds, so then growth theory is extremely, extremely important. And there's a lot of developments in growth theory. So which part I could not cover. There's no time for that. And of course, traditionally, there are two more components regarding, I have said earlier, the two major components of aggregate effective demand are consumption demand, and what we know as the investment demand. So there are theories of consumption, demand and theories of investment, which not strictly fall in macro. Micro elements are also there. So these three things have been not covered. Okay, so Professor Singh and whoever is there, I think I'm done. So I'd like to sort of stop sharing the.
Okay, sir. Thanks for your presentation, sir. One question is there from Amit.
Okay, please.
Amit Kumar, that is a short question. In stagflation, which theory works better, Keynesian or classical? Stagflation.
You see, if we, on a hindsight, it's easier to understand. Keynesian theory could not understand stagflation. It completely doesn't. It is totally a bouncer for them. Now the cricket match is going on. I'm using the language, therefore. So actually, people thought, the government policies, government was intervening so much that it was becoming predictable. So economies were developing some lethargy and all that. So some structural changes in the economy were needed. So policies which would allow, the free market to play a better role, the business enterprises to play more unrestricted role will help. So this neoclassical, particularly the monetarists, as I said, they have brought back the idea that government intervention should be less. There was too much, according to them, there was too much government intervention. So lessen the government intervention, allow the private players more freedom to operate independently, so that they will take care of the rising costs, they will take care of the rigidities, and this is going to take out the whole thing. So at that time, I think the neoclassical point of view was more relevant, but not just the theoretically, but then allowing more freedom to the farms and reducing the government expenditure that was necessary. So for India itself, for instance, we had so many shortages, so many difficulties before the liberalization. Now, once the liberalization started, farms, at least for about 10, 15 years, there was, in fact, there were for 25 years, there was a tremendous growth in the Indian economy, right? So, led by the free market, free enterprise, and so on and so forth. We still have the free markets, but then the global economy has now gone a little difficult. We have new challenges like climate change and all that. All right. So therefore, again, we are having more economic challenges. But at the same time, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes, say for instance, COVID time or in global financial crisis time, the government need to intervene. But the government intervention should not be permanent. In the post-Keynesian situation from 1930 to 1970, it was more or less permanent. The government will always be there. But the government need to come in when it is required. Otherwise, actually, if you leave it to the market forces, and very, very important, when I say market forces, the markets must be competitive to deliver. If if capitalism is pseudo capitalism, then it's not going to deliver. There may be growth, but there may be a lot of inequality. There may not be very competition. The consumers may not gain. If you remember, in the in the USA, for instance, when Bill Gates was all powerful, very rich, the what you call the restrictive, their competition commission kind of thing they have broken up the Microsoft company into two parts. Otherwise, Microsoft becomes too powerful. So that sort of things are required for every capitalist economy to expand in a way, grow in a way so that it's beneficial for everyone.
Thank you, sir. No more questions. So, on
Okay.
behalf of all the
Thank you.
participants and MMTTC, I would like to say thanks to you for sparing your time and elaborating this. Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So let me now leave the meeting.
So, dear friends, now you may go for a lunch break and we'll reassemble at 1:30 for the third session today, and that is going to be taken by Professor K.M. Nayak from University